Welcome to Just Liberty, where justice and liberty meet. I'm Alan Reinach, president of the Church State Council, with my co-host Bettina Krause, editor of Liberty Magazine. Our topic today is a very serious one. Antisemitism is a huge problem in the United States and globally. And our guest today, we're very happy to welcome, is our friend and colleague, Michael Helfand.
Well, I'm delighted that we have with us today Professor Michael Helfand, who is a nationally known expert on issues of church and state. He is the Brendan Mann Foundation Chair in Law and Religion at Pepperdine Caruso School of Law, where he also serves as co-director of the Newt-Bar Institute for Law, Religion and Ethics. And there was a great conference just a few months ago that I attended out at Pepperdine.
We both did.
We both did, Alan. That's right. And Michael is also a visiting professor at Yale Law School. And apart from all of that, if that wasn't enough, Michael also serves as senior legal advisor to the Orthodox Union's Teach Coalition. And he's a senior fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute. Thank you so much for being here, Michael.
Thanks for having me. Really great to spend time together again.
And it's great to have the chance to talk with you, but not so great that it's about a topic that is, becoming more and more sobering, I guess, when we see the headlines coming out of anti-Semitism on American college and university campuses. And I'm wondering if you can give us a sense of how bad it really is out there at the moment.
That's a really great question and a hard question. I always say that a reporter is good to the extent that they can give you the proportions of things, like how big things are, so to speak. And on the college campus side, it's tough to say. I spent my spring semester at Yale, where I have the pleasure of teaching at the law school. And you can go through a whole semester where everything seems fine and great. And then all of a sudden, things will start feeling less fine and great. And so as a result, it's really hard to get a sense of what the particular experience is like in the aggregate. My impression is, you talk to enough students, and unfortunately I get a decent chunk of phone calls these days. You can have two students who are walking, Jewish students on a college campus who are walking right next to each other who have completely different experiences. Two faculty at a college campus who have two completely different experiences. The best I can say is, or I guess I shouldn't say best, but most accurate is the number of complaints that come in now with respect to students and faculty on college campuses who are experiencing some form of anti-Semitism, some way in which they perceive that because they are Jews, what is available to them has become restricted, you've seen probably the statistics, has jumped exponentially since October 7th, which obviously has set off quite a lot of alarm bells within the American Jewish community and beyond.
Well, but it's not just, let's call a spade, so to speak. It's not just, experiencing anti-Semitism. It's actually being afraid, right? We have a very close family friend who is studying pre-med at USC, University of Southern California, and she is afraid to be on campus.
Yeah, so I can tell you, I've spoken to a lot of students on campuses. I shouldn't say on campuses, they've simply left. They no longer think that they can be sufficiently protected by whatever security is available. They think that the likelihood of violence against them has increased significantly. It's not a place where they think that they're going to actually be able to be full participants in campus life, because if somebody finds out either what their religious affiliation is or some of the commitments, in particular with respect to the state of Israel, that come along with their religious affiliation, they're not going to be welcome. And, there are differences. What does it mean not to be welcome? It can be that your perspective can't be shared in class when certain types of issues come up. It can be that you're no longer able to participate without signing some sort of form or document or commitment within certain kinds of student groups. That's something that's particularly pervasive right now. And obviously, it's also, this is what we've seen, the ability to move about freely on campus can be impaired, either because of actual physical obstructions, or because at a certain point there are only so many epithets that can be thrown your way before you feel like this is not a place where I came to a particular campus in order to meet new people, meet different people, exchange ideas, be challenge. That's no longer the environment that you feel like you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis.
So, this issue of rising anti-Semitism is on college campuses and university campuses is increasingly being framed as sort of this idea of free speech, and that universities have a responsibility to provide students with a forum in which they can express their political ideas, even if those political ideas, rub people the wrong way. Help us understand what is legitimately within the realm of protecting free speech and what sort of goes over the line into something that is far darker and far more dangerous.
The odds that I'm going to be able to fully help you, I mean, I'm hoping somebody explains this to me. This is a tough one. Listen, there's so many different ways to think about this. You probably have to, before I even start. Now, what we are dealing with is a clash between in many ways, between anti-discrimination law on the one hand, Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and at least in certain circumstances, either the First Amendment or First Amendment values. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. Not necessarily the First Amendment itself. And it turns out that the enacting federal and state laws that prohibit discrimination will often end up in conflict or in tension with free speech. We know all this. We know, like when many years ago, when the baker didn't want to refuse to bake a cake for a same-sex couple to celebrate their wedding, that he was claiming that he had First Amendment rights, and they were claiming that he was discriminating against them because the certain kinds of conduct associated with expressive expression is going to lead to this sort of conflict. I'm expressing, and on the flip side, no, you're engaging in discriminatory conduct. So in some ways, this isn't new. It just doesn't get framed that way, and that's like a big piece of this. And you have to go down the line, ask yourself how you want to draw lines between protecting people from discrimination and ensuring that individuals can express themselves. So that's kind of like big picture step one. And people should get that. I emphasize that because...
All right, but Michael, let me jump in here because,
Sure.
In terms of the sort of injury to a gay couple who don't get the cake baked by this particular baker, and Jewish kids who are subjected to fears of violence and various kinds of anti-Semitic epithets, there's a big difference in degree here, right, in the relative harms caused to the recipient.
So there's yes, maybe, sometimes.
Okay.
Is that right? Like something along those lines. Listen, Alan, you know this particularly well thinking about the Title VII context, right? So much of our Supreme Court doctrine about how free speech is supposed to work with anti-discrimination law comes from scattered lines in RVV St. Paul, a Supreme Court case back authored by Justice Scalia, where he kind of gives this, passing comment that, we should think of, anti-discrimination laws really pursuing or trying to prevent certain kinds of prohibited conduct it's going to bump into speech periodically, but that's not really what it's about. It's really more about conduct. And so we shouldn't think about free speech. But you get enough fact patterns these days. It's better than a First Amendment class, back from stories from campuses. For sure. Listen, I live in Los Angeles. What happened at UCLA recently, where, the police were told to allegedly, a complaint filed in federal court by last week by the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, along with Paul Clement's new firm, some pretty serious legal firepower on behalf of a number of Jews on campus. And, you know, there the allegations are, and I've actually spoken to a number of students, so I'm tempted not even to say allegations at a certain point, but we need to be fair about these things as best we can, where students are putting up barricades preventing other students from entering public buildings, publicly owned buildings, unless they say certain things like, I do not support the state of Israel, or just not even asking if they saw a Magen David, a Star of David, on their clothing. You know, there you're talking about physical obstruction from public buildings. You know, those are easy in some ways. That doesn't look like, you know, free speech. That's like, you seem to have a barricade here, and that's not speaking. You can't do that. This is a public building. But, you know, sometimes you get other things. You know, sometimes you get things that just look like speech. And how do you want to deal with those? So many different kinds of fact patterns. You know, trying to figure out what it is we're trying to do is super duper important. And, you know, at the outset, I said there's a difference between First Amendment values. Almost all of the schools in question that we're talking about, you know, say Berkeley, UCLA, maybe I'm forgetting somebody off the top of my head, Rutgers. We're talking about private institutions. So they don't actually have, because they're private institutions, they don't have to abide by the First Amendment. But you can imagine that schools, universities want to abide by the First Amendment. They want to uphold, they want to have rules that kind of mimic the values of free speech. And on the flip side, you have Title VI. Title VI prohibits federally funded programs from discriminating on the basis of race, color, and national origin. And over the past, since at least 2004, the Department of Education has understood both Palestinian Arabs as well as Jews to qualify under either race or national origin. This is a little bit of a debate. There's some lack of clarity because they have shared ancestry and ethnic characteristics. So, you know, under Title VI, if you're a federally funded program, which is every university, because according to the Supreme Court, getting funds, getting tuition dollars that our students are using federally subsidized loans counts. So they're on the hook. They have to make sure that on the one hand, they may want to uphold principles of free speech, but at the same time, you know, anti-discrimination law says, Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act says that they can't know that there's something going on campus, which even if it's not the university itself, it's some third party, and that third party is engaging in behavior that is preventing those who have a shared ancestry and ethnic characteristics from accessing the benefits of education. Putting up a barricade's got to qualify for that. I don't know if you ask me. And they know about it. They don't do anything about it. And the student can't access the very things that they're there to receive, the very purpose of the federally funded program. They're going to get in trouble. That means that they violated Title VI. That can potentially down the road put their federal funding at risk. So those are the stakes. You know, the school may want to make sure that people can speak and say a variety of things, but they also have to make sure that every student, in particular those who qualify under Title VI, can access the benefits of education. Physical obstructions are obviously problems. I don't know if you saw the Cooper Union videos way back when, early on, where Jewish students were locked in the library because an employee said, allegedly, according to the complaint, an employee said the mob is coming, and locked them in because apparently that was the only way to keep them safe. And if you're locked in a library, you can't go to class, so they can't access the benefits of education. You know, those cases really look like deep Title VI problems. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm gonna float something here and tell me if you agree with me or not. It seems to me that a big part of this problem has been the fact that university administrations, whether it's a public or private university, there's been a lack of clarity, and it's a lack of clarity that's been building for decades over what a university is. You know, is it an institution that espouses certain values and you know, puts its thumb on the scale in favor of certain values, or is it an institution that simply provides a forum for the exchange of information and ideas? And it seems to me that there's been increasingly, well before October 7, a tendency for universities to be activist rather than providing this neutral space. Is that playing into the whole confusion over the post October 7 discussions?
Yeah, I sure think so. I mean, maybe others disagree, but that's certainly my impression. What I'm describing just a second ago, like you had cases of like physical obstruction. People can't get to class. Students breaking into buildings, damaging property, making it impossible for students to go to class. So, that's going to, I think, that's not speech anymore. That's going to check the Title VI box. Then you got the more ambiguous stuff. Students just staying in a particular place and saying a whole bunch of stuff that is deeply offensive to lots and lots of Jewish students. I mean, deeply offensive to me personally. And normally we say, I don't like deeply offensive stuff, but maybe that's just how it is. And Bettina, I think like what you just said is at least to my mind exactly the problem, or has been the challenge. I have this instinct in me, which is we need to absorb deeply offensive conduct. That's just, I'm sorry, not conduct, deeply offensive speech. Like people say stuff and you live with it, even though it feels awful and terrible, but that's just how it goes. And I think that's how I would approach some of these cases, but for what you just said, which is, I think for a significant period of time, certainly in the last 5 years, we've seen a variety of instances where universities have stepped in because either students or faculty had to endure certain forms of speech that they found deeply offensive. And even if the speaker didn't intend it that way, and the university would establish rules and even impose certain forms of discipline because people engaged in offensive speech. And again, even if they didn't necessarily intend it that way. And a university said, that's not acceptable. And I can sympathize with universities that engage in have those sorts of policies. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in charge of people who are just hurling deeply offensive words and comments to other members of their community. Like, who wants that? But they created a system where we said, because you are hurt by the way other people are speaking, we as a university are going to step in. And comes October 7th, and all of a sudden, many, many American Jews on college campuses have that same experience, and they don't get the same kind of intervention. And I think, to me, like, if you had asked me, on a blank slate, what do you want to do, Michael? I would say, listen, this is why I've got a senior in high school, just graduated yesterday. And,
Mazel tov.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We chat about these things. I would say to him, like, listen, this, you want to go to college? Like, this is part of what college life is. Except here's the problem. To tell American Jews that they have to endure this experience, but not tell others, that's what makes American Jews, what makes me, I should speak about it in the first person, sometimes feel like a second-class citizen, meaning why isn't my pain the same as other people's pain? And so if universities really, if they want to say now, as many have, and in some ways, you might even describe it as courageously or in a deeply principled manner, said, we're going to change things up. Conduct is going to be a problem. You can't barricade. You can't do all these things. But if people are really speaking in the ways we want them to speak, maybe in the place we want them to speak so people can access campus, we need everybody to live with it. I think it needs to come with an apology. And I think the apology it needs to come with, if somebody wants to make sure that American Jews don't feel through this process like second-class citizens, it has to come with an apology that goes something like, we are so sorry we've screwed up for a really long time. And we're so sorry we're only realizing it now after you've experienced what you've experienced, because we've looked at this situation and we realize that our policies were wrong. And it's not fair that we've realized it on your backs, but that's what happened. And we're trying to do better. And we're really sorry. But if there's no kind of mea culpa explicit, it just means you don't care as much.
So when you talk about, the systemic problems that led to this, part of the conservative critique of the American university is that it has become captive to a kind of ultra-progressive anti-colonialism that portrays both the United States and Israel as the colonial oppressor, and that this has been taught for so long that it's easy for students now to take up the cries of free Palestine and from the river to the sea and that sort of thing. A position lacking in nuance in a conflict that has, well, it's a very difficult conflict, and it doesn't lend itself to slogans, and it certainly is kind of intractable, right? You know, how do you see the culture of the academy and how that has contributed to this experience?
Oh, I wish I even knew what to say to you on this one, Alan. On one level, I consider myself.
Is there any light in the conservative critique? And you're on campuses. You tell me.
Fair, very fair point. I am definitely on campuses in the plural. Campuses where I deeply enjoy the kind of intellectual and academic community, the faculty, the students. I will say I consider myself very blessed to have my home base to be Pepperdine and Pepperdine Law School. I regularly say I will never have a better employer for the rest of my life. I was in Israel on October 7th, and I was in Jerusalem with my family. My son actually spoke about this at his graduation yesterday. And I must have gotten on, I also taught contracts class on October 8th from a porch in Jerusalem. And my students were all like, here's an introduction I've never had to give to a class before. Our class, we're going to do this. If a siren goes off, I'm going to duck out for 10 minutes, but I'll be back, presumably. I must have gotten on October 8th and October 9th from friends, colleagues, administrators, the president of the university. I couldn't type fast enough responses to people checking in on me, how I was doing, how my family's doing. So I really, really consider myself blessed in this way. So Alan, you say to me, well, you're on college campuses. I think I may be on special college campuses. I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah. At the same time, listen, I don't think I can think of an issue within the law or kind of within intellectual life generally that wouldn't benefit from a significant amount of, intellectual diversity. I always say, I try to find people and friends who deeply disagree with everything I think and say. So many of my very closest friends are people who just call BS on just everything. And, no doubt that the intellectual and academic life on campuses doesn't quite reflect, I think, the intellectual diversity those types of institutions, as truth-seeking institutions, should aspire to. And so that presents challenges. I mean, it's just how it is. And obviously, when you mix that with the culture of activism, and I don't want to pile on activism. It's great students if they want to, take what they've learned and be activists. More power to them, within constraints, right? And with based on policies that are applied equally to various forms of affiliation in different communities in the same way, so that we don't have an unequal application that makes some people feel like first-class citizens and some feel like second-class citizens. That's all fine. But, the backbone is tough. And by the way, I think we're seeing things change on this front. I think universities have come to realize, they can do better on this front, and kind of hiring practices that try to make sure all views are representative is a form of diversity that is central to the academy. And I think there are a lot of places that are really striving and are in fact improving on those metrics. And, to some extent that gives us hope. It's hard when I talk about this to get away from, you realize that now, something about that will forever feel wrong until institutions openly acknowledge that they're making a conscious change, and it hasn't always been this way. Like, otherwise you just feel like you're being gaslit. Like, they're like, no, we are always committed. Look what we're doing. It's like, no, 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 no. I was there and I remember, and that's not how it worked. And, this happened and that happened, and you had a different way of doing business. And all of a sudden, it's me or it's my kid, and you're operating differently. And I think until we get to the bottom of that, all of these changes and improvements and aspirations, I don't know, to some extent, they'll ring hollow a little bit, at least I think to American Jews.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the reality. And, that's a reality that we're dealing with. I wish that we'd been able to solve everything in the 25 minutes that we had. Maybe
I'm surprised we were able to get anything done. This is impossible. Alan's like, I want to talk about a conflict that's been going on forever, combined with like First Amendment and anti-discrimination law. I mean, this is all deeply hard. People of good faith and good conversation, if we aspire a bit, we can do a little.
Yeah, so and that's the point. Go ahead, Alan.
I do want to just add one last sort of perspective on all of this, because it's only been within the last 2 or 3 years that I'm starting to hear rumblings of serious questionings within the Jewish community about, is America still a safe place for Jews? Is it time to leave? And, after October 7th, the question is, well, would Israel even be a safe place to go? My son, by the way, was in Berlin on October 7th, which erupted in anti-Semitic rallies. There was a lot of celebrating in Berlin over the attack, which is just so horrifying to me that people would celebrate that kind of barbarity. But, what's your perspective on, how broad the degree of anti-Semitism and the experience within the American Jewish community is? Do you agree that there's a lot more concern about American liberalism and whether it's really continuing to be a safe place for Jews? It's not
Alan,
a fair question. I'm sorry.
No, it's a fair question. Gosh, I don't feel unsafe. I don't think, but people worry. And I wish I had a good beat on it. I really, really do. If you pushed me against the wall, I'd say most American Jews feel safe. But there's enough, kind of data points where you find yourself ever so gently, just as you said, asking yourself, what's going to be in 5, 10, 15 years from now? I think that's 100% right. And a piece of you feels like, I wonder what it'll be. And then the other piece of you says, like, wait. This is what we need to stay here for. This can't be. Okay. This experience was supposed to be different. And it's tough.
The very fact that we're having this discussion, I think, is a sign of just how troubling the situation has become.
I think that's right.
So, Michael, thank you so much for talking with us today. I wish there was some, moment of happiness and light that we could end on, but I don't think the nature of the discussion lends itself to that. So all I can say is thank you so much for sharing, not just from an academic perspective, but also a personal perspective as well.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for engaging in the conversation. I think the light at the end of the tunnel comes from different kinds of people of good faith, thinking deeply about important issues, trying to build something better going forward. So really great hanging out with you today.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. This has been Just Liberty, where justice and liberty meet. I'm Bettina Krause, here with Alan Reinach. And until next time, remember,
eternal vigilance really is the price of liberty.